Thank you for listening to the Dog Trainers Podcast, a podcast created by dog trainers for dog trainers, or anyone who's ever fallen in love with man's best friend.
Hey everybody, welcome back and thank you so much for listening to the Dog Trainers Podcast. Mariano Alvarez here with Brent Labrada, and it's been a little while since we've had the opportunity to talk, just me and you, so I'm pretty excited. Before we dive into it, man, I do want to let everyone know that you can find us on Instagram, Facebook, and YouTube, all by searching Dog Trainers Podcast. And be sure to follow us on our personal social media pages as well. You can find us on Instagram. You can find Brent at Canis Behavior, and that's all one word, CANISBEHAVIOR. You can find me at Untamed Dog Co., all one word, UNTAMEDDOGCO. We want to give a quick shout out to some people that have been showing us love lately with a lot of our interviews lately. We've had so many. It's been Blake Rodriguez, Larry Crone, Natalie Dobkin, and Matt Hubble.
Sarah Brewski.
We
got Nahum Russell from Calm Canine Training. What's up?
Yeah, thank you guys so much for being on.
Don't forget Mr. Jonas Black.
Oh, Jonas, sorry, bro. So, but I'm bringing this up because we can really tell not only that we're making such great friends with these people and really having the opportunity to expand our network and just converse and talk dog training, but we can also tell that because we have conversations with all these awesome people that we are getting some new listeners in some new places. So shout out to Manhattan, New York, Chicago, Illinois, Brisbane, Queensland, Columbus, Ohio. Thank you guys so much for listening. And with that, I'm going to kick it over to you, my friend.
What's going on, everybody? As Mariano said, this is the first episode we have done in a long time that is just me and Mariano. And we are so grateful to all of our great guests. Just like he mentioned, we got, the Canine Performance Team, Natalie Dobkins, Matt Hubble, Sarah Brewski, Nahum Russell, Jonas Black, Larry Crone, Mr. Larry freaking Crone, honored us with his presence, which is great. Mr. Blake Rodriguez. Like we have had such a blast interviewing all of these wonderful trainers. If you guys haven't listened to those episodes, go check those out because they're a blast, every single one of them, and they teach us so many cool stuff. But hey, let's go ahead and talk about what today's episode is. Yes. Today's episode number 47. We're going to talk about our top 5 things that trainers get wrong. Right?
Yes.
Yeah. So this is hopefully this is helpful for you guys. Now, again, these are not judgment calls. We're not trying to put anyone down or make anyone feel uncomfortable, but these are things that we've learned through our careers that we did wrong, that we see our assistants doing wrong, that we see greener trainers do wrong. And we're hoping that this can help you guys just kind of be aware, a little bit more self-awareness. So that way it can help your business, help your clients, and most importantly, help your dogs.
Absolutely. And understand this, you guys, we're going to dive in here very quickly. I just wanted to make the point that Brent and I, we continue to get such amazing support and just feedback from our listeners. And if this makes sense, there's a certain trust in the listeners that like the podcaster has to have. For example, I listen to all kinds of podcasts for all kinds of different things. And I do get annoyed when like the host just sounds like they think that the listener doesn't get it. We know you guys are smart. We know you guys understand that we just want to make sure that we put out great content for you. So we know that you're going to take all this stuff, not as a negative, not as a put down, but just as an opportunity to learn off of our experiences. And if it helps you, awesome. Absorb it, take it in. It's like a lot of our guests have been talking about. Learn how to have that like efficient filter. If it's something that applies to you, take it. And if not, don't worry about it. Yep. But with that being said, let's dive right in. So the first point that I wanted to get into is newer trainers. They tend to spend way too much time defending a method or tearing down other methods. And politics in dog training is, it's always something that's been just a super hot topic. It's kind of weird that dog training is so political. It really kind of outshines a lot of other professions, I feel. Or maybe I just don't know, and maybe they're like that too. But I just wanted to speak a little bit to how important it is to stop all the infighting, talk to people from other methods and other viewpoints in the training world, because not only is it important to have these conversations from the perspective of like we're all trying to achieve the same thing, helping dogs, helping owners, keeping dogs out of rescues, keeping dogs from getting put down and all that good stuff. But also, as Sarah Brewski explained, I think very well, there is a ton of benefit to learning the different ways of going about things, because there are skill sets that lie therein that I think will end up helping you overall. So it's always important to be open to new ways of teaching, but I kind of wanted to talk to you a little bit about and just get your thoughts on on some of that stuff, like the various ways of training, and and why they're valuable.
Yeah, I think in dog training, it's cool because there's a bunch of different facets of training that people do, right? Like some people could be, R plus trainers, pure positive, force free, which has its own art form to it, right? Like in
Yeah.
order to not use aversives, you have to actually kind of be very, very creative, as we learned with Sarah Brewski, right? But on the other side, you might have someone who might be a complete compulsion trainer, right? Like I used to be a compulsion trainer when I first started out, and I learned some very, very useful techniques. I'm not going to knock it down 100% because
Right.
don't get me wrong, 80% of what I used to do is now evolved and a lot better. But there are some techniques that when you're working with high drive dogs or dogs who do want to control you and physically think they can take you, there are going to be certain techniques and methods that I still use till this day when given those particular cases of dogs.
Right.
Right, and those of you guys who work with aggression or have worked in some type of keeler method, you guys know those techniques that we're talking about. But everything in between, right? When we're looking at e-collar trainers, or we're looking at clicker based or marker based trainers, when we're looking at competitive sports or 4-H, or we're looking at AKC, people who do just obedience, and all of that stuff, right? You're going to see that there's just a bunch of methods or approaches or angles that you can approach to training. And I remember when I was a younger dog trainer, I remember spending so much time convincing and trying to tell people like, hey, this is a prong collar, and I'm going to sell you on this prong collar because that was the only method that I knew. Right.
Hmm. Hmm.
Nowadays it's like we're more versatile. Like I could use a martingale, I could use a slip lead, I could use a
Right.
choke chain, I could use harnesses, actually, even in some scenarios, right? There's definitely, I defended my method over and over and over, not because I think part of it, maybe I was arrogant, right? So I thought my method was the best method because, when you learn a method, pretty much it's kind of like you see the value it brings to you and you see the value it brings to the dogs that you train. So you're trying to convert everyone to that particular method, right?
Right. Right.
And when you start getting very dogmatic about a method, well, naturally you have a tendency of wanting to tear down other methodologies and ideas and philosophies as not as valuable as yours, right? Which is all
Right.
ego talking, right? This is all ego just in your head, just trying to tell you how fucking good of a trainer you are, right? That's all it really is. And so, I remember being humbled many, many times where the technique that I was using wasn't being effective, and I kept hitting a dead end with certain types of dogs. And I just remember, being humbled and feeling like, fuck, I don't know shit. And luckily, when I was growing up as a trainer, I had a mentor that I could be like, what do I do? And he was a balance trainer before there was even something called balance training, right?
Right.
So it was cool for him to be like, well, stop doing what you're doing.
Right.
Well,
Right.
if it's not working, stop doing it. Maybe try a different approach. I was like, what different approach? Try some food, try
Right.
some this, bring out a toy, bring out this. And he also worked a lot in sport dog training.
Mhm.
So it was a lot. It was really nice to have someone that says, don't get frustrated, think outside your box. He would always say, think outside your box,
Right. 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 Well,
which was cool.
I think there's a reason for that. Like, think outside your box. You remember, um, you've done the like Tony Robbins event, and I haven't done
Mm-hmm.
like Tony Robb, but I've done like similar,
Yeah.
and there's that whole thing, like you draw 9 dots, and it's like, how do
Mhm.
you make 3 lines cover all the dots? And the only way to do it is to make like a big triangle that goes past the boundary of the 3 line type thing. The point of the idea is it can work, but you have to think outside the box. And people have this tendency to just assume you can't go outside of the 9 little dots in there.
Right.
And Bobby, who we've had on, shout out to Bobby, he's an amazing, amazing trainer.
Yeah.
Um, I think what he taught us, because I had a chance to work with him a little bit as well, not nearly as long
Mhm.
as you, is there is the reason that these various methods exist is because not only are there different types of dogs that respond to different types of training, but also because even if we're talking just one dog, like one example dog, the various ways that you can work one particular command hold different truths, hold different like bits of information that are going to be valuable to the dog and the owner and the trainers and stuff like that. And
Mhm.
here's just a quick example. So we have a few dogs in right now who are very excitable, like to the point to where they're difficult to control. They're not like aggressive, but they're very nippy. They're puppies, and they're really nippy in particular with mom. All of them. They're different moms, but all of them are, so they're a little calmer if I'm trying to like, trim up their eyes because they're like, doodles and or just hold their paws to see if they need a trim for their nails, something like that. They just will not sit still. With my trainer Julia, they're that much worse. Not because she doesn't know how to handle them, but they are just that much more excitable from the
They like
jump.
test her more.
Exact 1000%. Now, my story is this. We've been working place commands. These are younger puppies, mind you. And Julia is amazing with puppies, so she likes to do a lot of fun, toys, food,
Enrichment stuff. Yeah.
right, all that good stuff, which is definitely valuable. And the dogs their patterning is looking amazing. These dogs will hop right on the bed, they'll lay right down, and it's great. And I totally get it.
Yeah.
However, here's a totally different way to teach the exact same command, the place command.
Mm-hmm.
Calm place patterning, the way that like Sean did it in his DVDs, the way that Jeff does it, the way that, a lot of these guys, where it's not a lot of toys, not a lot of food, you're slow down. A leash, in their case, a knee collar, but not necessarily,
Mm-hmm.
very slow. I walk the dog on, I pick up on the leash to get him to sit down, I mark with the release, I move him off. Everything is very even keeled and slow.
Mm-hmm.
But it's the same command, place. The reason why these two different approaches exist is because one is meant to pep the dogs up and keep them moving.
Mm-hmm. To activate the dog.
Right.
Like
The
Larry Crone uses place as an activator.
Exactly. And the other one is meant on purpose to teach the dogs to slow down. And depending on what the issues are, like these puppies, learning how to slow down would be a very valuable skill. So,
Right.
I just wanted to kind of point that out, that even if it's just one command we're talking about or one particular dog, sometimes it's beneficial to go through various types of the exact same command so that they learn all these different things. I want you to be excited and go to place, but when you get there, chill.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. That is a good point. I think that brings context. Like something as simple as, whether the dog does an active sit or an active down, like in sports work, you want that dog to be focused and ready for the next
Right.
command. And you want that dog to be storing up this drive so that way, when you give the next command, the boom, he springs into action. Versus a lot of pet dog training, we want more calming, we want more anchoring, we want more grounding, on certain concepts. And so there's going to be different ways to achieve those goals for sure. And sometimes they might even blend into each other, right? Like you might start with an active place command, and then eventually you start teaching calm with duration, and then even calmer for longer duration. And then maybe you start layering in some control with a little slip lead or an e-collar or something. And gradually you taught a really awesome send away. But then all of a sudden you start teaching the dog, now you're going to stay there for 30 minutes,
Right.
So
Right.
little by little you build it up for sure.
Exactly.
For sure. No, I think that's good. And I think going back to this topic, spending too much time defending your method and tearing down other methods, I think this is all ego, right? In newer dog trainers, again, no one says, hey, I want to be the most egoic, self-centered, I know it all dog trainer. But what tends to happen is when you find something that is true or that works or that is helpful, and this is my particular opinion on it, you want to defend that truth, right? When you become dogmatic about something, you're going to think that you have so much faith that what you're doing is right that you will fight for it, and in turn you will try and talk shit about other training methods.
Yeah, I mean, and that's not really
which we see in the force free world all the time.
Well, yeah, all of it, right? So yeah, I mean, and that's not really something that's like surprising even to say. I mean, people don't want to be wrong. Nobody wants to be wrong, right? That's just human. We get it. But the point we're making is, while it's good to, I mean, obviously, if you're going to be dogmatic about a method, one would hope it's a method that you personally believe to be the best. So while it's a good thing to want to strive for what you think is the best,
right,
you still have to keep your eyes open, because I've never come across like a single mainstream, not like crazy out there fringe method that didn't have something very valuable in it. Like every single method I've learned over time is a take on, and I'm sure you would agree, I'm glad I did. It was totally worth the time and the effort, and unlearning certain things so that I could learn this, and then you can learn it all back and task switch back and forth. It was totally worth it.
Yeah, true, very true. And I think so. I guess the best way to kind of, not correct, but just kind of wrap your head around this particular thing that a lot of trainers do wrong is just keep an open mind. Like don't be so religious with your method, or your idea, because every dog trainer, every method has something valuable to maybe add to your repertoire, and what it is that you're doing. Yeah. So that's what I would say.
Yeah, absolutely. And and with that, I think I want to introduce another topic here.
Hmm.
Forgive me, guys, I'm copy
Yeah.
pasting a little bit.
Yep.
So, since we're talking about the importance of learning how to task switch between methods, I do want to talk about the potential downside therein, because everything's about balance, right?
Yeah. Good. Good.
Is people can often tend, when they're newer trainers, to bounce between methods without ever mastering one.
Hmm.
And I think that has a lot of downside to it too. And I just wanted to make the
So this
quick
is number two, right? So bouncing
correct,
between methods and never mastering one.
correct, exactly
Second
right.
thing that that young new dog trainers do wrong.
Right, right, right. And we'll be sure to recap this at the end for everyone too.
Yep.
So, when we're talking about task switching and never really mastering a single method, I think of the whole like white belt dog trainer thing. And the reason why, and I won't belay this point because we talk about like every day, is the reason why is as a white belt, as we've talked about before, as a new trainer, your job is to get a game plan going. Something like we were talking about with the prong collar. If you're
Hmm.
really good with the prong when you're newer, you just convince people to do prong because that's what you know. And you learned that because you believe it to be the best. We get it. However, a lot of people make this mistake. They think, okay, it's good to learn prong and slip lead and halty and gentle and food and which it is. Except they try to do it all at once, and a lot of these different methods have very, very different feels to them, like from beginning to end.
Hmm.
When you're good enough, you can blend between them back and forth.
Hmm.
However, when you're first learning, you tend to do yourself a disservice by not really mastering any one thing because now you have no game plan. Now
Hmm.
you're just kind of free floating. And the reason why I make the point of the white belt dog trainer is because, again, in jujitsu as a white belt, your job is to get a game plan. If you're good at leg locks, you go for the leg lock. If you're good at whatever, you go for that. And the other person's job is to throw you off. So your job is to stick to your one game plan as best as you can because they're a white belt too. They only have their one game plan too. So it's a battle of wills at that point. But the better you get, the more game plans you can have. But you can't sacrifice the bird in the hand for the one in the bush.
Right.
So have a game plan, stick to it. Then when you have it solid, then deviate, but not before.
That's 100%. I agree with that. I think one thing that also happens is, I've always been a trainer that has had an abundance of dogs to work with, right? Like working for a facility, we had many board and trains. Probably I did a year of board and trains before I ever even took a client, right? So I had hundreds of dogs under my belt before I even taught someone how to train a dog.
Right.
And the interesting thing is, I think if we are bouncing around between methods, it's easier for me to play with certain methods when I have like 4 weeks to train a dog.
Right.
It's not easy for me to do that if I have a paying customer and I have 6 private sessions to try and do stuff, right?
Right.
So
6 hours.
6 hours to
Right.
play around with different methods, right? And so I think one of the big things that helped me, growing up in a facility was the number of dogs I got. And, there were some dogs that I was like, this dog has a high food drive. So I'm going to learn these techniques. Or this dog loves to play with toys. So I'm going to learn these techniques. And, I would look up different things and apply them with dogs in training. However, I stuck to a game plan to make sure that the dogs learned their fundamentals that people were paying for.
Right.
So I was, in essence, I was a white belt and I only deviated, but I would come back to my format to make sure the dogs were learning the format that that company particularly was learning. And through that process, as I got good at those deviations, now I would actually throw those into the actual company curriculum. And then finally, when I became the training manager of that company, we revamped the whole curriculum.
Right.
You know what I mean? We changed the systems of training. We added more positive stuff. We added more food work. We added more play. We added more awesomeness. So we got dogs who were, you know, when I
Sharper.
first, they were sharper, they were happier. We had happier clients. We were actually able to expand like different group classes because of those different methods, right? So I was able to teach a food-based group class. I was able to teach a puppy group class because of that, the toy seminar, toy work, all these different
Right. Right. Right.
workshops.
Right.
And it was cool because I had the dogs and the people to play with, right? Working at a facility. So I guess the point I was trying to make is it's easier for you to deviate if you have a game plan, as you mentioned, and if you have an abundance of dogs to work with, right? And I have some friends that, they didn't work at a shelter, or they didn't work at a kennel, but they volunteered at shelters all the time. So they had an abundance of dogs to play with and learn techniques and just kind of exercise their new skills that they were learning with dogs who needed it, and it helped.
Can I point out the quintessential difference between why it worked for you and it doesn't work for the white belt dog trainer?
Yeah.
You were good enough to deviate and come back to your format. You were a blue belt dog trainer. Deviating is good, but get your game plan down first. Brent did that, then started experimenting.
Yeah.
Because you knew if something wasn't working, you can still come back to your core. You still already had a solid foundation in X. Right? That's that difference. So for people listening, you guys, make sure that you've got a game plan, something. We would encourage you to have a sort of game plan like that. You've even have written out, like I've got my phases of training behind me. I know Brent has his that he breaks down, something that lets you know, am I on track or am I not? Okay. Now,
yep.
I want to bring up another point here. I find that when a newer dog trainer, and I respect it, by the way, and owners is the same thing. I meet owners all the time. I'm sure you do too. Like, it's 2021, right? Like, owners tend to problem solve by themselves, right? YouTube University. I was told that today. I thought that was funny. And I get it. I like them being proactive. However, they tend to look something up and try it once, try it twice, and it doesn't work twice or like in 2 tries, so they give up too early. That's something that I really find is a potential downside. And I wanted to point this out if anybody listened to our interviews with Michael Ellis and our interview with Blake Rodriguez. Michael Ellis pointed out to us, I think a lot of them did, Tommy Davis and Tyler all pointed out to us, of all the obvious good sides to social media and dog training, the potential downside, or one of them, is there's so much info out there that trainers don't ever gain traction in any one thing. They see this and then they see that and then they see this and this, and they try everything, and because they were telling us that, I was asking Blake about it, and I got the sense that like he felt like I was trying to lead him in that direction. And I was like, no, I mean, if you don't feel that that's the case, then don't say it, but that's kind of what I was expecting anyway, he would say. And then he didn't, which is fine. And then later we kind of circled back around to it, and then he did. And I was like, oh, okay. I think he was more weary of felt like I was pushing him in the direction.
Right.
But I bring that up because the point I'm making is the potential downside, as agreed upon by pretty much, I think, everybody that's been on with us, of all the different YouTube and Instagram and all that good stuff, is yes, try things, but don't give up in 2 seconds. It's not going to work right away, because not only is it new, this concept, to the dog or the owner, but it's new to you as the trainer. So you still need to learn the fundamentals behind that particular method.
Right. I always tell my clients, I said, what's on YouTube isn't wrong. It's just incomplete.
Right. 1,000%. I say that too. Yeah.
And so it's just a matter of, explaining that to them. But also, I mean, we're talking about dog trainers here, right? So like dog trainers sometimes fall into the same thing. Right. And I think it's tricky. I think it comes back to that abundance of training of dogs.
Tricky.
Oh,
sorry, go ahead.
Tricky. Oh, dance. Is that the one you were doing?
It's tricky to rock around to rock.
Oh yeah, that's the way.
That's right on time. It's
tricky. Anyways, well, welcome to our rap group, guys.
Yeah.
All right. So let's see. Confusing to the dog. Oh yeah. So sorry, where were you at? What point were you at?
I was just making the point that if you don't give it a method a chance to work and you give up too early, you never really did it justice.
And I hope, and I like to have faith in people who call themselves dog trainers, that you guys do have a game plan, know, but those of you guys who are struggling, should I do this? Should I do that? Because I had a call with a good friend who's a dog trainer recently, and she calls me and she goes, she comes from like a T3 camp, so she's from Sean, Jeff and everybody. And she goes, okay, Brent, I'm officially a fan of Michael Ellis. And I'm just like, where have you been?
I know.
Where have you been? But she goes, okay, I just went down this rabbit hole and I was listening to Michael Ellis, and she got worried, because she goes, he was hearing all these things and they made 100% sense. And, I feel like 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 I feel anxious. Like I feel anxious that there's so much out there that I don't
Mhm.
know. And so she was kind of having this little anxious moment with me where she was saying like, so should I practice more of this or should I do that? And I said, do your thing,
Mhm.
stick to your game plan. And
Mhm.
when you can, if you have a board and train or you have a friend's dog that you want to practice with, because you're a good trainer, I told her. So you're a great
Right.
trainer. But yes, all that other stuff helps you. But you don't deviate off of your game plan just yet.
Mhm.
And so it's exactly that. It's seeing all this content online can definitely make you feel that you don't know shit.
Yeah, it's intimidating.
It's intimidating that you don't know shit and that you're an imposter, right? I used to get imposter syndrome all the time
Dude, I
when I
still
was a
do
young.
sometimes. Yeah, for
Yeah,
sure.
yeah, and it's especially when we get the chance to talk to some of these greats that
Right.
we're just like, oh shit, like I gotta do some research, right?
It hit me the other day
Mhm,
when I was talking to my girlfriend, but
mhm,
about the podcast, and
mhm,
it just sounds like it's not us. It just
mhm.
sounds like it's so weird to have a normal because my girlfriend she knows I mean she's the one who puts up with me, poor thing. So like she
Yeah,
understands, this guest and scheduling, and that means we can't do dinner and whatever. So it's so weird to be able to talk to her in such like flippant terms about like, oh yeah, no, I'm talking about the one with Michael Ellis, not the one with
yeah,
and we're
yeah,
just
yeah.
throwing these names around.
She has no clue they
Yeah,
are.
but as I hear myself saying this, I'm like, who the fuck do you think you are? Like,
Yeah, 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 yeah,
but
yeah,
it's just
yeah.
cool.
Yeah, no, it's dope. It's really dope. And to kind of go back to the point of just the anxiety that you might get, it's just like, it's in due time, right? Like
Right.
I loved when Larry Crone was talking about um, you know, he was talking about like I just spent $10,000 to go to Ivan Balbanov's.
Right.
Was it
Right.
Ivan? Yeah, it was.
Yeah,
Or
Ivan
no, no, no,
Balbanov.
no, no. It was Bart. It was Bart Ballone's. It was Bart
Oh,
Balone.
okay.
Yeah,
Okay.
sorry, Bart Ballone's. He was going to Bart Ballone's seminar. I think. Sorry, Larry, if we misquoted you. He was going to. He spent $10,000 to go to someone else's seminar. Is the
Right.
point? And this
Right.
guy's been doing it for 25 years,
Well, and he just retired.
and he just retired. And this was
Right.
something that this guy had a game plan. It's evolved throughout the last 25 years, but now he's ready to go and to go and learn and go. So it's something that was so humbling and that was so actually reassuring to know that it doesn't matter how long you've been doing this, as long as you keep doing it, and as long as Tyler says, dog training stays stimulating, you will learn a lot of stuff. And
Hmm.
one thing Larry said was he goes, I want to learn at least 50% of what there is to know in dog training before I die.
Right.
And I was just like, that's dope.
Yeah.
He goes, right now I know 5%. So balancing between methods, guys, don't be so anxious to know everything, right? Do what you can, be present with your clients, be present with your dogs, take the time to really hone in on your methods and on your skill sets, because sometimes some of the stuff that you're learning, you're not ready to learn it until you've mastered
Hmm.
your skill set, whatever
Yeah.
that is.
Dude,
So,
and that's that point that I make all the time with the watching video is like I'll watch two really high level grapplers go at it. And my skill set currently, my personal skill set allows me to see what they're doing that's better. Oh, he grabbed this here, he did this there, he did this faster than I would, whatever. And so I get to that point where all these things that I've just taken in, I've seen them, but I haven't yet absorbed them and made them me.
mhm,
Once I've done that, 2, 3, 5 months later, whatever, now I'm that much better than I was, but obviously still not nearly as good as them. I
right.
can watch that same match again, exact same match, and see now new stuff again and so
Yeah.
on and so on. And you slowly absorb what you can. But it was never, I mean, just the very concept of learning, the very concept of information was never supposed to scare you or like
Yeah.
squeeze you down.
Yeah.
Take in what you can take in right now, get
Yeah.
that little bit better, roll with it, get comfortable with it, then take in some more. Digest it piece by piece by piece.
Yep. There's no rush.
Right.
There's plenty of dogs and they're not going anywhere.
Another
So,
point to bouncing between the methods and never mastering one though is it can be confusing to the dog,
mhm,
trainer aside, right? And
yeah.
again, that can be because the dog, I mean, if you're working leash pressure downs and then move to food downs and then move to whatever,
Yep. Yep.
it,
Yep.
you're moving the target so much that it is good for dogs to learn various things and be well rounded. But if you're
Hmm.
switching back and forth all the time, they
Hmm.
can get like whiplash.
Hmm.
And
Hmm.
especially again, if this is a method that you personally aren't comfortable with yet because it's new to you, your timing, your technique isn't even going to be there yet. So you're not even giving the dog really a fair chance because they're not even getting like a proper example of the method.
Right.
Right.
Right. Yeah. Well, they're not, it's the method's not there consistently enough for the dog to adapt and learn from it.
Right.
Yeah.
But my point being though, it's not even there when it is there. It's not even there from somebody who's competent in it.
Oh yeah. Got it.
You know?
Got it.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's like learning English from a non-English speaker.
Right, exactly.
Yeah.
Right. It's just not fair. Like you were never going to learn, but that wasn't your fault, you know?
Yeah. Makes sense. And you'll learn all the mistakes that all the errors that come along with it. Yeah.
Correct. Right.
Cool. All right, guys. So now let's go ahead and move on to number 3, spending too much time talking tools versus talking about the processes of training. Right. So let's go ahead and kind of define this a little bit, because a lot of newer dog trainers, obviously, you know, kind of going back to methods and defending things when we have tools that we really like. You know, and let's say, for example, we're one trick ponies. We only work with a specific pinch collar, a choke chain, or a slip lead, or whatever it might be.
Food, toys,
food, or
yeah.
you work with food, or you work with clickers, whatever your method is that you're stuck to, or the tools associated to your method is, you know, it's sometimes we talk too much about tools, and we talk too much sometimes about like jargon, and we talk too much about terminology, like, you know, positive versus negative reinforcement, or we start talking about, you know, conditioned reinforcers, or we just start talking about things that we heard in a book and we saw in a video.
Can I just say something really quick? I'm so sorry to cut you off, but as you were saying this just now, I'm thinking back to the state of dog training today. Marketing, what's huge, pure positive. It's so easy to like, it's such an easy pill to swallow. It's so palatable. Tell me how you feel about this. R plus training spends way more time talking about the process of training than the average balance trainer does. Now, they do it in a way that still, I mean, the tool is food, but also the learning process is food. So they spend more time actually talking training, whereas people are like, no, well, let me show you the e-collar, let me show you the prong collar, where they're like, no, the thing is, you want to mark things on time, you want to jackpot, you want to keep the dog motivated, you want to, oh, that's an interesting thought.
That sounds cool. Right. And I think good. That's a great epiphany you had. Because the other part, the opposite of talking about tools is we talk about the process of training. Right. And so things like I was taught, right. You normally, I would say 95% of my consultations and phone calls, we never talk about tools. Right. We never talk about them. Right. Like the idea of tools only, like whatever tool I decided to use on that dog for that project, it's new to the owner when they get it. So how does that happen? Let's talk about how is it that I can close a deal with someone, right? Or educate a new customer or a rescuer and not even have to bring up tools, right? How can I do it? So what I do, I'm gonna teach you guys all my secrets on this podcast.
Yeah.
But what I do and what I've done, and maybe some of you guys already do this, we talk about the process of transformation, right? Where your dog is, where your dog needs to be. Shout out to Corey Chavez, because what he does is he does a reverse engineering of the behaviors that they want versus the behaviors that they have now, right? And so what we do is I kind of do something similar. But what we do is we talk about the process of transformation, where your dog is now and where the dog needs to be, right? So I kind of do it more as a narrative. And so we talk about, so in order to tell this story the best that I can to a client, I need to know what their house is like. I need to know what kind of issues they're dealing with. I need to know the dog's temperament, what good experiences, bad experiences they had. And so what I'm doing is I'm collecting all this data in my head to really understand their issues, right? And as we know, as dog trainers, sometimes we get the same case, like is this echo of the same case over and over and over. It's a puppy, no structure, blah, 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 blah.
Right.
But especially when you're doing in-person sales or education, it is so important to connect and be present with those owners, right? Because on a very human level, if they trust me and they know that I care about them and that I know and I care about their dog, that they are more likely to take whatever advice and criticism that I give them, right? Or if I give them advice, they will take it more seriously if they know me and they trust me, right? And I used to do so many cold sales, people walking into my facility, and I would go and I would close them literally on the spot, right?
Right.
And so the way I do it, I get to know everything that's wrong. I get to know about them, their family. I figure out, where they live. And I'm just a chatty guy. So I like to talk to them and I figure all this. And in my head, I am putting a story together. Okay. Second thing I start doing is I start educating them. I start qualifying myself. So I start
Mhm.
educating them a little bit on, okay, what is it that I see wrong? Like, what are the main top three, top five things I see wrong with their story and where things could be better? So now
Mhm.
all of a sudden I'm giving them these nuggets of expertise where they go, oh, so I should crate the dog. Yeah, this is why you should crate. You crate the dog because he has too much freedom. He's peeing all over the place. He's biting the kids all the time. Crate him, right? Just as an example.
Right. Right.
I
Right.
also think that your dog should not be on a harness right now because it seems to be making the pulling worse. So
Mhm.
they go, oh, so what would you put on? Well, we'll get to that a little bit later, or I'll deflect it, or I'll say, right, put the dog on a collar. The
Mhm.
big key is the dog just shouldn't be choking himself,
Mhm.
right?
Mhm.
So people go, oh, right. Then I might, say number three of the top three things that's wrong with the picture, and then I say, but most importantly, your dog just lacks patience, or your dog lacks self control, or your dog makes silly, impulsive decisions, and he doesn't know any better. And they go, yeah, you're so right. And so what we're doing here in stage two is I'm qualifying my expertise. I'm qualifying that I'm present. I'm qualifying that I'm connected, and I know all your problems.
Right.
So
Right.
now all of a sudden, trust is even stronger.
Right. I'm
Now,
listening to you. I hear you.
I hear
Let
you.
me help you.
I see you, and I
Right.
understand you.
And I have
Okay.
what you need.
And I have it. I got what you need. Right. And then the next stage ultimately is from those things. Then maybe I ask them, okay, what have you guys tried? Right. So then I'll kind of have them tell me, well, we've tried this, we've tried that, we've tried this, we've tried this trainer. Or some of them go, we've done nothing. And I
Right.
go,
Right.
all right, so you guys don't know what to do. All
Right.
right. So usually when people explain to me, like, what have you guys tried? They go, oh, I tried this one trainer. We did all these clickers. We did all these, or we put this one trainer had a prong collar. And I'm reading
Mhm.
how they're reacting to these tools. When they say prong collar, are they saying it with regret? When
Right.
they say food trainer, are they saying that, oh, this was a waste of time? Or are they saying it, I really liked the food?
Mhm.
Right. And so what stage three is allowing me to do, it's allowing me to see what they've tried, where they are mentally with this idea of training. Like, are they experienced? Are they not experienced? Do they have biases? Do they not have biases? And what this allows me to do, this allows me to figure out an angle I can approach my recommendation process, which is my last stage. Okay. Because if I straight up go in and say, you know what your dog needs, an e-collar, a pinch collar, a choke chain, automatically, if I go in and I skip all those three other steps, automatically they're just going to put their hands up and be like, get out of my face. I don't want you as my
Right.
trainer. Right.
Right.
So in stage three, I'm getting a read for how I should approach my recommendation stage, which is number 4. Right. So my recommendation stage, this is now where, again, I'm not talking about tools. We're talking about processes. We're talking about how we're going to go ahead and move forward in fixing your problems. Right. So it could be something like this. All right. Well, we have to change your whole management system at the house. Like, all the habits that your dog has inside the home needs to be adjusted. And so that's where we kind of talk about some of the stuff that we talked about with Larry Crone, right? How 80% of it is behavior. Your dog is
Right.
on the couch. Why is your dog begging? Why is your dog? So we have to adjust these things. My job is to coach you through them so you understand. So your dog understands that you guys make the rules in the house, and when the dog is following those rules, we can give him the love, we can give him the praise, we can give him the affection, we can give him the treats. So I'm not saying we're going to take everything away from your dog. I'm saying we're going to take everything away or control things so that we can give it to you, so that you can give it to him when he's being good.
Right.
Right.
We'll give it to him
Which
in a way that's beneficial or at least not detrimental.
that's not detrimental. Right. But look
Right.
at it. Now, what we're talking about the process, as you talked about with the R plus community or the force free community, they talk about the process.
Right.
I'm going to control these things so I can leverage them to make things positive for your dog. right? So management systems, crating, leash on your dog, don't let it, house rules, boundaries, all those things. And then we teach them how to do that. Then we might talk about, okay, obedience. So what do we got to do? This is the process of obedience we have to work on. Three basic components of obedience. We got to teach your dog to focus a lot better on cue. We got to teach your dog to control themselves on cue. And number three, we got to teach your dog to make better decisions, period. Okay. And so the only way that we can do that is through trial and error, trial and error. We teach your dog what's expected of them. Then the second thing we're going to do is we're going to teach your dog how to prioritize between what he wants and what we're asking him to do. Now, if what he wants is something desirable, like something that's appropriate for him, well, we will always guarantee him that if it's appropriate for him. Right. If he does the right thing, he's going to get that thing. Right. And so then, we kind of just go through the process. Again, we're explaining the process, and people, and am I lying in any of this, guys, as dog trainers? Like, I mean, I can't hear you guys, what you're saying right now, but I'm not lying. What I'm doing though, is I'm talking to them about the process, because me as a dog trainer, right, at my skill set now, I don't know if I'm using a pinch collar on that dog. I don't know if I'm using a star mark. I don't know if I'm using a slip lead. I don't know if I'm using, an e-collar. I don't know any of these things yet, because I haven't even laid hands on that dog.
You haven't put hands on the dog.
I haven't even put hands on that dog. I don't know if this is going to be a week of food work, if this is going to be 3 weeks of, I don't know any of this stuff. And so I can't be tool specific, because I don't know necessarily what's going to work best on this dog. There's been times that I've put pinch collars on a puppy and he freaked the fuck out.
Right.
Freaked the fuck out. So I had to work that dog on a slip lead for 2 weeks just so he doesn't shut down. Right. There's been times that I put a slip lead on a puppy and he's choking himself out for 2 sessions. And I'm like, all right, well, we gotta try something different.
Kick it up a little bit.
Right? Yeah, we got to kick it up a little bit. There's been times that I've put a pinch collar on a mastiff and I was like, let's go. And I'm cranking and yanking and this dog doesn't feel shit. Right.
Yeah.
And I didn't know that until I started putting hands on that dog. So go ahead.
It's funny how much these tools can finesse. It's funny how, like, even if you were to go with a tool that would be good, only it's too much. Like I was working a dog today who he loves to argue back with the prong collar. He'll grab the leash and do the whole thing and barrel roll and all that good stuff.
Right.
So based on that versus more sparsed out, even stim of like an e-collar, I know he'd do well with an e-collar only. And it's actually a cattle dog. And I remember the cattle dog that you had in LA.
I love cattle dogs.
Very sensitive to the collar.
Yep.
So there's those like 50% stim reducers. There's always an answer, but you have to get a little, little technical with it. I just wanted to bring up a point. There are times where either you already know for some reason or another that a certain tool will be better for the dog, or at least that whatever the owners are currently doing isn't going to work for the dog moving forward. And I just wanted to talk a little bit about how you can go about desensitizing the owner / the dog to that particular tool. And here's what I mean. I've had a lot of success in the past with a dog, and these are like several dogs, but like with a dog in general, who they meet the trainer recommends e-collar, which I don't think they were wrong for the recommendation necessarily. It's just the way they went about it was all wrong. So now the owners have gone a couple lessons or, whatever the case, and they don't like this trainer. They just kind of politely brush him out the door and never call him back. And now they've got a sour taste in their mouth about the e-collar, even though the e-collar would end up being the ultimate, like the best tool for this particular dog and this situation in the house. So what I've gotten really good at is getting them comfortable again. And what I had to do in that case was they talked to me about what the trainer did. This is something you can't get wrong. Or at least I don't think so. Don't slam the trainer. Even if you disagree with what he did or whatever the case, I would just kind of like, oh, okay. So here was the story. People get a cattle dog mix. He's reactive. So the trainer went to boundary setting. I get it, right? Only the problem is they put the dog on an e-collar, brought him to the park, and then fucked him up when he was lunging and growling at people, like day one. So they were telling me this story, and like you said earlier, just the way that they're said, the words that they're choosing to describe what was happening and everything else I can tell how they feel about it. I can tell how they feel about him. I can tell how they feel about all of it.
Mhm.
So I'm listening and I go, wow, yeah, that's, and I just tell them, I'm like, yeah, boundary setting. And they go, yeah, that's what he was saying. I'm like, yeah, I get it.
Mhm.
Here's what we need to do.
Mhm.
Let's take a step backwards. Let's get into our foundational stuff. Let's teach the dog what we need before we start holding him accountable for things he doesn't know.
Mhm.
That's not fair, right?
Yeah.
And the problem is, and they're sitting there too, like, yeah, yeah, oh, okay, that makes sense.
Mhm.
And if they want the specifics, oh well, let's try some food, let's try some toys, let's try some this, let's try some that.
Mhm. Mhm. Yep.
Tell me what the dog likes. I know what he doesn't like,
Yeah. Yeah.
and
People.
right, you know, and they're like, well, he does really good with, he loves his frisbee. Oh, cool. Can I see it?
Mhm.
And I just see the dog pep right up, even though I'm a stranger too,
Mhm.
and dog's like, oh, hey, stranger, you got a frisbee? Can I play?
Mhm.
And I'm like, you see that?
Mhm.
This is going to be our
Mhm.
in right here, you know.
Yep.
And from there, we start talking about, okay, but guys, here's the thing. I don't think that the e-collar was the wrong way to go. I just think that we needed to do some foundational work before we go to the park.
Yep.
And then I start describing that process. And then
Scaffoldings.
I got them back on board with e-collar.
Mhm.
They were not feeling, they were ready to return it and all that good stuff.
Well, and that's because you listened and you adjusted your approach.
Right.
You
Right.
listened and you adjusted your approach, and that's. Go ahead. Sorry, you're gonna say something.
No, 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 you're good. I just
Oh
I just wanted to make the point that these
no, I
people,
think and we've all been in that situation, right? Like we have to sometimes make up for that person's fuck up. You
oh
know
yeah,
what I mean? As a trainer, right? And even though there's so many times we get those clients that say, I went to this trainer and that trainer and yada yada yada, as we were talking about in stage 3 of the process, like yeah, sometimes you have to approach things very different than that. I've met people that I go, yeah, I just put I read them and I'm like, yeah, we're just going to stick a training collar on this dog and give him a couple corrections and he'll be all
right,
right,
right.
And they're like, really? I said, yeah, let's try it. And I do it. Boom, boom, boom. One session. They're like, oh my gosh, yeah, let's sign up for a package,
Right,
but,
right,
but there's a certain type of read on people. And I think as much as we are dog trainers, having good reads on people and having good reads on what they're willing to do and where they're at and their heads, it's going to be super, super important. So I want to move on from this. I think this was a good, I want to go maybe to some other of the bullet points, but just to recap kind
sure.
of my process, you guys can totally steal it if it helps you. Um, I qualify, I find out everything wrong going on with them. I make them open up to me, right? And tell me everything. And through that, you're going to find a lot of little nuggets of information that are going to help you guys figure out your approach. Number 2, I drop them with a couple experience-based golden nuggets of knowledge. Pretty much, I identify the problem areas as I see them,
Hmm.
and I give them very quick, simple solutions. So, yeah, well, you know what? Your dog's biting your kids. Let's put them, somewhere else in the house, maybe a baby gate. Let's put that up, and that'll prevent the biting from your kids, right? Your
Right,
dog's pulling on the harness. Well, we're probably going to change it to a collar. Oh, which collar? I don't know yet, but definitely we need to teach your dog to not pull on leash. That's number
right,
one, right?
right,
And then, oh, your dog's fearful of things. Well, let's focus a little bit on socialization, maybe some exposure. But this is what we're seeing. This is a lack of socialization issue. Would make sense because Irby, for the first 6 months that you had him, you didn't take him outside of the house. So that's a lack of socialization issue. So what I'm doing is I'm identifying the core problems, not all the problems, because there's a lot of little problems, but
right,
the top 3, the top 5 problems as I see them. So
right.
that way they go, you're right. That is what's wrong. And a lot of times in that process, you say something that they go, oh no shit, I wasn't even thinking about that. Right. And when you blow people's minds, or when you open their eyes to things, they're automatically like they're all of their attention is at you, or is on you. Right.
Yeah,
But
no, I agree with you, and I think a fun little it's not a trick, but it's just something I think that trainers tend to do when there's, because you can't sit there and talk about all the dog's problems and be there forever.
yeah, yeah, yeah,
So what you're getting at is you talk about the major problems that kind of trickle into the little problems,
yeah.
and it's a really fun little thing you do where like you talk about a few of the major problems, and then you just give them that little nugget of like, yeah, and this leads to all these other little things, and I just
Yep,
leave it at that. I'll say
yep.
exactly that, and then
Mm-hmm.
they fill in the blanks in their heads, and they're like, oh
Uh-huh.
shit, you're right,
Yeah, yep,
and
yep,
but they
yep.
they want the more, like they want to hear you say it, and you just keep moving.
Mm-hmm.
So now they're in that position of like, well, tell me more, like what's
Yep,
next, and then
yep,
you're like,
yep, yep.
well,
So then stage 3 is maybe I'll ask them what they've tried or what they've been doing to fix those problems that I mentioned.
right,
Right. Now, maybe they tell you that in the first step, right? Some people just talk, 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 talk. They give you all the information. But what I'm really trying to figure out is where is this person? Uh, mentally in regard, what's their relationship to the process of training? So number 3 is figure out what their relationship is in the process. Are they novice? Do they have a bias? Are they completely ignorant and know nothing? So are they a blank
Right.
slate? Or is this an experienced dog owner who is, who's had 6 German Shepherds and he's ready for you to fucking throw a choke chain on this dog and crank and yank this dog, right? I've met those
Right.
for
Right.
sure. They're always in their 60s and 70s.
Yeah.
But so that's number 3. And then number 4 is make your recommendations, but talk about the transformation process. Talk
Right.
about how the dog needs to go from point A, which is his bad behavior, to point B, and what we need to develop in this obedience program. Is it confidence? Is it socialization? Is it focus? Is it self-control? Is it patience? Is it impulse control? And you talk to them about the things that they need to understand are lacking and how you're going to fix their problems for them, right?
Right.
And this whole time, we don't have to talk about tools. And we don't have to talk about tools because if you guys are, if someone asks you straight up, like ask me straight up, do I use pinch collars, Mariano?
Do you use pinch collars?
Yes.
Yeah.
Simple. The answer
Yeah.
is that simple. Do I use e-collars? Of course.
Yes.
Do I use e-collars on small puppies? No. Maybe if they're barking in the
I
crate
was gonna
and I've
say,
tried
yeah.
everything out. Yeah, I did
Right.
on my puppy. I know that.
Yeah.
But do I shape a lot? Like so I can be very upfront. Yeah, I use those tools. I also use food. I also use clickers. I also use verbal markers. I also use toys. I also use a lot of things. And so I can shut that down real quick when people
Mhm.
ask a silly question. Of course, I use everything. I'm a dog trainer. I use everything.
I'll tell you what else too before we move on
Mhm,
is I noticed this. Maybe you'll agree with me.
mhm,
I noticed that instead of being like almost caught off guard by the question, do you use e-collars? Well, if you're just like, well, yeah, and you're just clear and upfront about it, they're
mhm,
like, oh, apparently it must be okay. Like
mhm, mhm,
they believe your clarity, your confidence, and like,
mhm,
yes, of
mhm.
course,
And what I do is I also explain. If I see that there's an aversion, I'll say, I want you guys to understand a training collar is a tool that's designed to
to do it
actually do the minimum amount of pressure for your dog.
right,
So I know some of these things might look scary or they might sound weird because they're electric or I know that it's around the dog's neck, but I need you guys to know like dogs grab each other by the neck and drag each other on the ground and they're having a blast.
right,
So like the dog's neck is not as fragile as let's say our neck.
right.
Right. And so when I explain those things, they go, yeah, okay, that makes sense. So you just to keep that conversation open because again, people don't want to hurt their babies and they rightfully so, right? No one wants
Right,
to
right.
hurt their dogs. And as your point you made, I think like you have to say like, I don't want to hurt your dog either.
Yeah,
If I hurt your dog, he's not going to like me. And I can't really train him if he doesn't like me. So
right.
it's pretty simple, right?
Yeah, I'm not here to hurt your dog. I'm here to get you from A to B. I'm here to get your dog into a better space. I'm here to help you solve this problem and understand that it is my job, it is my obligation, and it's frankly my like privilege and
And my
fun to
passion and my
my
passion.
passion to be able to find the absolute best, easiest way to do that for him, for
Yes.
you, for everybody else. And that's why it's hard to really stick to one particular tool right now because I don't know. I haven't
Yep.
touched it. I have no idea. You pop the hood and we'll find out what's going on. And
Yep.
I'll keep you posted along the way. But I don't want you to focus too much on any one tool.
Yep. Exactly. They're just tools.
Right.
Let's talk about the
Right.
process.
Let's talk about the job. Right.
Yeah. Let's talk about what needs to happen. Perfect. Let's move on to number 4.
Awesome. Awesome. So here's one. Number 4, not knowing how to properly scaffold in training. This is one in particular that I'm really passionate about.
Mhm.
And I wrote it down as doing too much too soon, but I'm going to add to this. When you don't know how to properly scaffold in training, I notice that trainers either do too much too soon or they do too little too late. I think that that's just
Mm.
as likely. I find all the time that newer trainers, they make this mistake. When we say not knowing how to scaffold properly, we're talking about not being able to push the dogs through their phases in training. A quick example. The ultimate goal is I want to take my dog off leash, go for hikes, yada, 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 right? Runyon Canyon. I love that place. Trainers either make this mistake, they do 2-3 lessons in the house, then they do 2-3 lessons in the front yard, then they go for Runyon Canyon. And of
Yeah.
course, the dog is struggling, way too overstimulated, way too distracted, yada, yada, yada.
Mhm, mhm.
Or you sign up the dog for a 3, 4, 5 week board and train program, and you don't take the dog out to Runyon Canyon until like 3 days before they go home.
Yeah.
You know,
True.
things like that, or at least
True.
to the steps up. It's house, Runyon. It's
Yeah,
not
yeah,
like
yeah.
house, slowly more distracting, and so on.
Hmm.
Now, this one is something that really I find myself very passionate about, because when we were talking to Tyler and we were talking to a lot of the, like Michael, a lot of the guys that are more analytical about training,
Hmm.
we were talking about the process, how important the process is of finding out what the difficulties are from the dog's perspective.
Hmm.
Why are you so distracted? Is it that squirrel? Is it the dog? Is it this? Is this?
Hmm.
And if you go from the house with no dogs in it to the mall with like 14,000 people in it and some dogs, you have no idea what it's. Is it the smell of the food? Is it the noises? Is it the, so you have to be able to scaffold things in such a way that you can more or less pinpoint what the difficulties are. Oh, you're
Yeah.
scared of the shopping cart. Oh, you're
Hmm.
scared of the, the big wheel ladder things at Home Depot. Oh, so that we can
Hmm.
work through them accordingly. Because if not, people tend to throw the dog in there all at once. Really, either way, even if you're doing too much too soon or too little too late, when you're doing too little too late, you still rush the end of it. So the dog's still
Right.
getting tossed in too quickly,
Right.
and they just don't know how to cope, which means you're probably going to overhandle them in order to make up for their lack of like obedience, which
Yep.
means the dog's going to shut down, which means he's just more afraid of the Home Depot thing now.
Yep. Yep. And that's all kind of, in a, like back again when I was a compulsion trainer, there was a lot of really shitty scaffolding. It'd be like, okay, dog learned how to sit. Bring out the squeakers.
Right, 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 right. Bring out the
What I mean?
basketball, the
Bring out, yeah,
skateboard.
bring out the
Right,
skate. Oh, the dog's in for chasing skateboards. All right, dog knows how to sit now. Bring out the skateboard and
right.
let's crank and yank on this. And kind of like what you were talking about earlier with the cattle dog, right? They just he just put he put the e-collar on the dog and took him out and said, all right, we're gonna go zap the shit out of this dog.
Right.
So it is definitely scaffolding is super duper important for there to be understanding, right? And there are some behaviors that we know and it's contextual, and a good dog trainer can read it, but that you can just nip, right? There are certain
Hmm.
behaviors you can just nip, but for sustainability, there has to be a certain level of expectation that gradually grows and gets stronger. And then you take that to Runyon Canyon or the park.
Right. And I want to add this, like we talked about earlier when we were talking about the importance of learning various methods,
Mm-hmm.
right? Even if it's for the same drill, food,
Mm-hmm.
or rather, excuse me, sits for food,
Mm-hmm.
leash, whatever you call it.
Mm-hmm.
I'm gonna add that same importance into scaffolding,
Mm-hmm.
because
Well,
if
I'll tell you this: R plus work, positive reinforcement work, taught me scaffolding in a beautiful way, in the shaping of things, in the close approximations of stuff. Like, so yeah, like
Mhm.
that's why I will always love the R plus world, because they are master scaffolders. What is it that Sarah Brewski said? She said, a lot of people are sorry, they say people are constantly, or in balance training, people are constantly trying to control the dog.
right, versus in R plus training,
They're
people are controlling the circumstance around the dog.
or the environment. Yeah, yeah,
Or
yeah.
right,
And
right,
I thought that was so cool, because in R plus training, it's like they are controlling more variables that are not the dog
right,
to make the dog more successful,
exactly.
right? Versus we're constantly in balance training, we're constantly trying to control the dog and leaving the environments uncontrolled.
Right.
Not all the time, but that's a common mistake that we can make. Cool, great point. Go ahead.
Yeah, yeah. And I think that, since you bring up R plus training, I agree with you, number one, that for shaping behaviors, it's hard to beat.
Mm-hmm.
I learned R plus training. I mean, I learned it in a combination of ways, working with like puppies. Puppies tend to be a lot of sport dogs,
Mm-hmm.
so they still need to learn their stuff. They still need to go through their food work. But the point that I was making was there's a reason why scaffolding is what it is. There's a reason why you don't just put the collar on the dog who just learned it and then bring the skateboard out and fuck him up when he's after the skateboard.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Because I tell people this all the time. Depending on how you're working the particular lesson, like, calm patterning with place, calm patterning with down versus food work, place and down, sometimes you're teaching more than just the command.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes you're teaching the importance of focus. Sometimes you're teaching the importance of drive and really earning the reward and engagement and communication. Sometimes you're teaching patience. Sometimes you're teaching the value in letting something go when it's not necessarily important or beneficial for them to focus on that thing, i.e., the skateboard, even
Mm-hmm.
though a sit is a sit. So when you're scaffolding, you have to take that into account. You don't just you wouldn't just write out a training program from a scaffolding perspective. Like, oh, first I'm going to teach sit, then I'm going to teach down, then I'm going to teach heel, then I'm going to teach place. You write it out like, first I'm going to teach the dog the importance of communicating with me. Then I'm going to teach the dog why it's fun to communicate with me. I want to build some drive. I want to have some fun. I want to build some work ethic, focus. Then I'm going to start teaching the dog how to be patient. Then I'm going to start getting into socializing. Then, so scaffolding works in a different way than people tend to think. And I just wanted to point that out as to why you go, why would you bother if the end result is to go to Runyon Canyon and heel off leash? You can get there, but first you got to go, you take the puppy through the understandings of, this is why this stuff is what it is. Then we can step into, level 2, level 3, and so on.
Right. And there is another thing that you mentioned, and sometimes it is possible that the dog can adapt, but let's say you work in the house for 3 days, you work in the front yard for 2 days, and then you start doing the next 2.5 weeks at Runyon. Right. So can the dog adjust? For sure. Can the dog eventually get better and progressively, just can you develop what you want to develop at Runyon? Of course.
Right.
But you could also develop some bad habits in the process.
Right. I want to ask you something. I'm sticking to your point, but I want to ask you this way.
Yeah.
Because if the question is, can the dog, like if you take the dog out there, will the dog adapt? The answer is almost certainly yes. That's why dogs are so amazing. However, in order to get that dog to adapt in that particular scenario where you took him out there too soon, did you stress the dog way more than you had to?
Yes.
And if the answer to that is yes, would you consider that a successful training program?
No. So that's the point I was getting at. Yeah.
Okay.
Good thing. Yeah. So would the dog adapt? And my point is if you did go for the next 2.5 weeks to that hiking trail where there's all those crazy distractions, the dog will have to now be reliant on the correction or the excessive reinforcement that you had to put on them to be able to listen in a particular situation like that. Right. And so you were going to say something. I thought you were going to say something. You said we are not only teaching the dog, drive and all that stuff, but we're also teaching state of mind.
Correct. Right.
That's something too. And so
that's what I was getting at with the food work. You're teaching drive, calm, patterning, relaxation, focus, long duration stuff. You're teaching calmer state of mind.
Yeah, exactly. And so I think that's also something that you can I get a dog to, just again, even if when we go back to shitty scaffolding back when I was more of a compulsion trainer, I would demo dogs for clients and their tails would be tucked between their legs,
right?
And that's because we would actually do, I would end up falling into the second form of shitty scaffolding, which was I had 4 weeks with a dog and I didn't push the dog until week 3.
Right.
You know what I mean? So there was there was kind of this extra pressure that was being put on the dog because he was about to go home 3 or 4 days before his graduation date. Right. And so that's I think that's the downside of having a time limit with a dog for sure. It's really easy to get exhausted and procrastinate and do all those types of things, which isn't fair to the dogs, right? At all.
Right. And I wanted to bring this up too. This is something that this is a little sub point that I'm also very, very much passionate about. Direct versus indirect reps and the benefit. And what I mean is this: whenever we have a dog, let's say a dog comes in. So the dog that I was talking about earlier, the cattle dog. Yeah. The one that I have currently, the one who's very sensitive to the e-collar. The reason why he's here is because a really sweet, young lady adopted him, let's say a couple months ago at this point. He bit her boyfriend in the face. When I went to meet him, we go for a walk. He's horrible on leash. He's lunging at every single dog he sees. It could be a block away. And I started talking to her about that, the benefit of direct versus indirect attention necessarily. And I gave her this example. For example, if your dog lunges at a person, that's a boundary that I have to set. No, you don't do that. That's a clear and direct challenge to the thing you've just done, so to speak, right? However, there's also a ton, I would say the majority of me getting him to not lunge at people is going to be indirect. I'm not just going to take him around people and correct the shit out of him. I'm going to put him through food work and teach him it's fun to listen to me. You like me. Then I'm going to gradually, at a speed that the dog's comfortable with, slowly start to introduce boundaries. I'm still doing the same job. I'm still decreasing the likelihood of him wanting to lunge at people, especially if I'm around, but it's indirect. I'm not fighting with him every step of the way. And
Right.
that direct versus indirect, I bring it to scaffolding because yes, I agree. If the goal is to take the dog to Runyon Canyon and then be proficient, you have to get your reps in at Runyon Canyon for them to be proficient. That's direct training. But the indirect training, people love to devalue all the time. Well,
Mm-hmm.
if he's biting, I don't really care if he sits or lays down. I just need him to stop biting.
Mm-hmm.
And it's like
Mm-hmm.
I understand that, but there's a lot of value in teaching a dog how to sit with food, and then there's a lot of value in teaching a dog to sit with leash, and then all
Yep.
this stuff is going to help you stop him from biting.
Right. Right. Exactly. Like how do you condition the dog's brain to make better decisions?
Exactly.
Right. And conditioning the dog to make better decisions is sometimes putting them in less stressful situations, not exactly the scenario, but something similar or parallel to, so that way the dog can actually learn the right decision to make. So that when you do take him to Runyon or you do put the skateboard in front of him, he's already can predict what he's supposed to do.
Right. The more we talk about this, the more I'm starting to feel that parallel.
Mm-hmm.
Like, you tell me this all the time.
Mm-hmm.
Somebody can learn something analytically, but until they feel it,
Mm-hmm.
they're not going to really stick with it.
Yeah.
The what I'm feeling in this episode this evening is direct is just as important as indirect. However, direct is the balance training. Direct is controlling the dog.
Mm-hmm.
The indirect, which again is just as important as the direct, is controlling the environment around the dog to kind of coax them to making the right decision.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
and I just thought it was fascinating the way that Sarah had broken that down for us, and
Mm-hmm.
I also think it's fascinating just how valuable both sides of that coin are.
Yes, 100%. And controlling the dog versus controlling the environment, and
Right.
how, it's kind of like Blake Rodriguez said. It's funny because like we keep referring to the last 8
I know.
episodes, but like Blake Rodriguez said, it's kind of like we're reflecting on what we've not necessarily learned for the first time, but we've heard other people say again and again and again and again. So it just helps solidify that what you know as a trainer is correct, because other people that you respect are also doing it as well.
Right.
And it makes sense for the dog. But what he was saying was, what was it? What was the point? Shit, I just forgot it. What was it?
No worries. Direct versus indirect, balance versus positive,
Yeah,
the
yeah. We're
dog
talking
versus
about
the environment.
controlling the environment versus controlling the dog.
Right.
Controlling the environment.
I think if I can assume, let's see
What
how
Blake,
well I know
what
you.
Blake said.
What Blake said. If let's see how well I know you. So, I think what you were getting at, because I remember you loved this when he said it, was the way that he explained the conditioning process. We need to know how to get more of something, how to get less of something.
No, that's not it.
Oh, damn.
But
Okay.
anyways, Blake Rodriguez said some dope shit. I will hopefully remember it later.
Okay.
But I forgot what it was. God dang it.
No worries. Well, while you're thinking about that, I want to talk a little bit about honestly gauging the dog's current ability to do things, to learn, to focus, and and like the reason why I say like learn and focus is two separate things is because a lot of times I notice this is something that was fun in like military life, right? Like basic training, stuff like that. Things that are meant to stress you on purpose. They know it's going to stress you. And they also know very much why they're doing it. That when people stress, typically, they have a harder time in taking information. Dogs are the same
Yep,
way,
100%.
right? It's like two lanes of traffic merging into one. There's stress and there's info, and sometimes that just doesn't quite work out.
Yeah.
The people who can handle it are the people they want, which is why they do it. Dog training is different because the objective isn't to stress the dog out like that per se. However, the objective is to find the most efficient, most effective way to stress the dog just to the real standard of what they're going to be doing. If the dog is reactive and nervous outside, I at least need you to learn to be comfortable outside. Or if you get nervous for whatever reason, I just need you to have enough state of mind, like enough presence with you to not make that one decision. Don't bite, don't lunge.
Right.
Yeah.
And it's kind of, similar to what you said, but, I remember watching some detective show, and they were saying like people who have suffered trauma make some of the worst eyewitnesses. Like if you were part of the explosion, or if you were part of the bank robbery, or if you were part of this, and it's because when they're under stress, Like
Right.
it's
They're not
going, they're
processing.
not processing. It's not necessarily going to a memory because they're in fight or flight mode. And
Hmm.
when they're in fight or flight mode, there's not a lot of retention of all the details,
Right.
right?
Because it doesn't matter. Just get the fuck out of there.
Get the
Right.
fuck out of there. Exactly. And
Right.
so a lot of times when our dogs are anxious or stressed, same thing happens, right? And it's interesting. I was just working with a client the other day how a correction can actually be used to maintain focus
Right.
in some scenario if the dog is that scatterbrained or driven, or sometimes even that anxious. Her dog was extremely anxious. 3 or 4 corrections in, the dog's locked in, head appealing, looking at her.
Right.
She's like, "Oh, I didn't know that this little world existed."
Right. Right.
But then sometimes it can have the adverse effect, right, where it causes too much stress, or now the dog feels they're under attack, or whatever it might be.
Correct.
So yeah, I think that's important to see. Is my dog learning? Is my dog not learning?
And I love that you pointed that out because that's exactly how I was going to kind of tie this back into scaffolding. Honestly, gauge the dog's ability to learn currently. Is the dog, I mean, when we talk about scaffolding, you do have to push the dog. And naturally, just the very nature of pushing, even if that pushing is food work,
Mm-hmm.
it's stressful because it's change,
Yep.
it's growth. It's stressful in that good way. But one thing I like to say about training is like it's my job in a sense to stress them to a degree. Like the first day of school, it's scary. It is not my job to stress them any more than is absolutely necessary to achieve the desired outcome.
Right.
So if you're honestly gauging the dog's current ability to like intake info, if the dog is too stressed out to learn currently, back off.
Mm-hmm.
If the dog is so sharp that they can take a little more on their plate, push it.
Mm-hmm.
But gauge these things and find out which is which.
Yeah, 100%. 100%. Let's move on to number 5. So
Sure.
number 5, you want to read it? Go ahead and read it.
Sure. Number 5. Newer trainers tend not to know how to personalize training for the client.
Yep. And I think this is kind of going back to the jujitsu references, the white belt versus the blue belt, right? I think
You're making me so proud.
I know, finally it's sticking. But the idea here is, yeah, it is hard to personalize training for the client, especially when you're a newer dog trainer, right? If you have one format and you are, you are pretty much, this is the common mistake. Newer dog trainers try and teach dog owners how
How they would do it.
Right.
Right.
train the dog, right? And one of the issues that happens with that is you have more reps than those owners, right? Like, you know where to put your hands, you know how to hold the leash, you know where to push the button, you have better timing, you have all those things. And I remember something as simple as like trying to teach a client to pivot turn, right? Like every dog trainer out there, if you've done any type of leash work, there's a pivot turn. You about turn, you go the other direction, the dog follows. If the dog doesn't follow, he gets a correction. And I remember just trying to teach people to do it quickly and have good timing, something that I could do in a split second. I was so frustrated as a trainer to be like, why can't you get this?
Right.
Why can't you just turn and pop the leash? Like, it's so simple. It's 2 things. But really, if you break it down, it's like 16 things.
Right.
You know what I mean? And not everyone's coordinated. There would probably be like 1 out of 8 clients that would be able to get it really easily. And it's just, it was something. But that's where I really learned in those type of circumstances, where I'm trying to teach them how I can do it. I'm not trying to teach them how they should do it.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's really, really important. I think it's important. The point to be made is that, like, you have to train the person that's in front of you.
I was gonna say I couldn't agree more, and I just wanted to touch on for one more time and say scaffolding, the process of teaching via scaffolding, applies to teaching the owners as well as how you taught the dogs.
Humans too. 100%.
Right. So no, I totally agree with you, and I think that a big reason for it, number one, like we talked about earlier too, is when the trainer just kind of knows one method, that's like the only way they know. I think another benefit of learning different methods is you learn different ways of explaining things, because every method has its own, like, it's its own complete thing. It's a method. It's got its own ideas as to why and how and all that good stuff. So the more you play in between them, you become that blue belt and you start to learn the benefit of this versus that. A big issue that I noticed, though, with not personalizing the training for the client, I think is something that Larry Crone said very well. is 20% of its obedience, 80% of its behavior. So dog trainers who, and he caught flack on Facebook for the post. I think it was on Facebook, right, or YouTube.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Dog trainers use like the place command too much. They overuse the place command.
Mm-hmm.
The place command is a valuable tool. It just may not be the optimal tool all the time, every time.
Right. And you shouldn't necessarily waste a whole session teaching it.
Exactly.
If there's other things you should be working on.
Right. Or if the dog just doesn't need it. If the dog,
Yeah.
so because it may not be placed, maybe whatever, right?
Mm-hmm.
So then the problem with cookie cutter type dog training is if you just have the curriculum and you run the curriculum, what if that's not what they need?
Mm-hmm. I've done that.
I've done that too. I've done it too. And or like, what if it's what they need, but you're not teaching it in the sequence that they in particular are going to be good at learning, or all these different things. So it's important to be able to play the game a little bit. An easy example that I think of when how to personalize training for a client is if everybody has like their rough phases of training, like what's a rough, like here's probably like a pretty safe guideline that somebody uses somewhere for phases of training. Food work, leash work, finishing work, like, I'm going to move the dog to food, then I'm putting him through leash, and I'm putting him through whatever.
Or like food work, leash work, distraction work.
Exactly.
And then proofing.
Right, et cetera, et cetera.
And yeah.
Right. So then here would be an example of personalizing training for a particular client. Let's say this dog, for whatever reason, just isn't that food motivated. And I'm just not getting that many behaviors out of them. Okay, fine. No big deal. I'm going to start with leash work. But I'll tell you what, once the dog, because I've done leash work, is comfortable, open, willing to work, yada, 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 I'm still going to go back and get my food work done. I'm not going to neglect that part of the process. Just sometimes you got to learn how to play the game a little bit, depending on what the dog is giving you. Yep. And these are things that like trainers tend to be comfortable doing, deviating from the game plan, from like the game plan, so to read the dog and the owner in front of you and play the game where you need to. Like what you were talking about, I think just before we started recording, was you were trying to find the way to explain, I learned something and like I noticed it solves this problem, but then I learn another thing and I notice it solves more of the problem, but there's still a little of the problem left. So I got to learn this other thing. And I feel like I've heard this before. The right thing done at the wrong time is the wrong thing.
Yeah.
So you do have to be willing to play with the timing of things if that's what needs to be done, so that the owners understand the importance, so that they feel the information, so that they follow up with the information.
Yeah, 100%. That's yeah, and that's exactly. And I think that's an experiential thing. I think you have to try things, especially because unless someone coaches you and you can do simulation after. I mean, that's the thing as a dog trainer. There's not a lot of simulation,
right?
Like
they're dogs, they're living animals. How do you really?
Yeah, like you're able to, when you do a board and train again, you're able to repeat and fail, and then make an adjustment because you have several weeks to work with the dog. That's easier. But with a person, it's you have an hour. You have one session and you have to get it right, and it's tricky. And I think that's kind of where a benefit of I think failing safely is what I was going to talk about. Failing safely with Blake Rodriguez. That's what I call back to failing safely. We're going to talk about how, I remember the point. I'm going to go back to that point. Those of you listening, and I'm going to come right back to this point.
Go for it.
The point I was trying to make, we were talking about direct versus indirect benefits of reps. In the indirect benefits of reps, we're allowing the dog to fail safely. And we're allowing the dog to learn from their mistakes. And we're allowing the dog when the dog can learn from their mistakes without being severely punished or shut down, then you have a dog who's better at understanding what you wanted them to do at Runyon Canyon. That's the point I was trying to make. Anyways.
And a dog who's willing to make mistakes, which is a necessary part of the learning process.
Exactly. So I think going back to number 5, which is personalizing training, sometimes dog trainers, we don't have enough practice trying different things with different people. And if you're lucky enough to get a lot of clientele in and you can practice and you can, see what works. I remember I used to do this thing where I would try the same thing for like 2 weeks against all my follow-ups, all my clients. I would just try one approach for 2 weeks, see how it worked. And I would be like, okay, it worked with that type of person, didn't stick so well with this person. And I wouldn't necessarily say it was a script, but it was a focal point, right? And I would try it with those people and it would work. And then I would get bored, like my ADD would kick in, and all of a sudden I'd be like, okay, how do I want to focus on something else. So then I'd make that the objective, or I'd make it all about technique, or I'd make it about home behavior. I'd make it about, food work. We're just going to go over food work. Right. and I would practice teaching people different things the same way that we tell you guys, like, hey, you have to practice different methods, with dogs. Like, the way you learn a personalized training for your client is also practicing different methods of teaching. I
Right.
remember I went through this whole phase where I was writing everything down for them, right? And that helped a certain amount of clients. And then I realized, like, I'm not the type of person to write stuff down. So what did I do? I wrote it down to templates and I
Hmm.
would email that, right? Then I had a situation where, you remember my giant TV, right? That I
Oh
always
yeah, yeah,
that I
yeah.
always have. So those of you guys who don't
On
know, like,
wheels.
yeah,
Yeah.
I made this a thing at my facility where we had TVs, and still till this day at my facility now, we have TVs on on rolling stands. And so I
Hmm.
can take a 65-inch big screen TV and into any room for a lesson, for a lecture, for a seminar, it doesn't matter. But I have TVs all over my house on wheels, which everyone thinks is like, what are you doing? I was like, trust me, comes really handy during Super Bowl. Um, but but the idea is like, I tried visuals. I would have PowerPoints. I would have slides.
Right.
I tried audio. Right, I would record things for my clients and I'd send it to them. And it was so funny. I was just trying all these different quote unquote techniques or methods of teaching, and I got to see what stuck and what didn't stick, and what was good and what was bad. And I'm so grateful that I did, because I think it really helped, my chops as a human trainer, right? Really testing all of these things out. And there is no right way necessarily to teach. There's just a lot of experiences that you're going to put together to see. Now, what I've gotten better at over the years is to see, like, what client could benefit from what.
Hmm.
Right. So in
Hmm.
my company now, like, I have a catalog of videos that I can send them as references. I have a catalog of written work that I can send them as references. I have Instagram stuff that I can send them as references. I have this podcast that's the audio version. I can send them, oh, check out the structure video, check out the punishment video. There's so many things that we can do and
Right.
that are useful now, that that's how I've been learning to personalize my
No,
training for
I
clients.
agree with you. And a cool, again, direct versus indirect, a cool byproduct of having done this research
Mhm,
is you then get the confidence that comes with having done this research.
mhm,
So that when clients give you questions, you give them clear, concise, confident answers, which is confidence inspiring to them.
mhm.
There's nothing I hate to hear more than when I'm asking somebody something. Maybe now, like I don't know if you're like this too, but now that I'm a dog trainer, I have my like career, the thing that I've dove into and I've made it my job to master this to the like Larry Crone said. I want to be good. Why wouldn't you want to be as good as you can be, right?
Mhm.
So I get really annoyed in any other field if I need your help. If I ask you a question and you sound unsure, I'm like, you're the pro. I'm paying you. Don't be
Yeah.
unsure.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
I think
It's
it
like,
helps a
I'm at
lot.
a supermarket and I'm like, do you guys know where I can find a jar of mayonnaise? And they're like, yeah, aisle 7.
Right. Well,
Versus that.
but because
Yeah,
that's
go
like
ahead.
that's a product. I'm
I
talking more
know.
like
I'm joking, but that's
I know.
confident. But it does piss me off when someone's like,
Mm,
don't you work at a supermarket? Don't they
right.
quiz you on this stuff?
Yeah. Yeah.
Sorry, I'm just being bougie. I'm
They,
being
they
bougie.
quiz taxi people on that stuff.
Yeah.
I heard that like London, New York taxi guys are so good with their memory that they have like a bigger whatever that memory is it the hippocampus. Anyway, whatever it is, they're
They got
super good
bigger
with their memory.
brains, bigger
Yeah, big
brains.
brain place. But no, but the point I'm making is because you've made it a point to do this research, you've tried the
Mhm.
audio, you've tried the visuals, you've tried different ways of explaining things. You can draw off of any one of these things, so
True.
you're never really like stuck. And because you're
Right.
never really stuck, you're just confident, you're ready to go with answers that
Mhm.
would be applicable to their question.
Yep.
And owners feel that. They're like, oh, this guy knows what he's doing. He knows what he's talking about. I can tell. As
Mhm.
opposed to like, well, and you're not even confident. Why would they be confident in your training?
True. 100%. 100%. I think this kind of wraps us into our last point, which is, it's our job as trainers and educators to make things make sense. And so, for the simple reason, so we can have an impact on that dog and we can have an impact on our clients, right? And not necessarily in that order. Sometimes you have to have an impact on the client first if you even
Right.
plan on touching that dog. Right. And so this was a fun episode, man.
It was.
I'm so glad we did it. I think we've actually had this outlined, I think, for several months. We
It's
just
been like 3 months, and not only that, man, but I think it's been fun just me and you doing our thing. It's been a while.
Yeah, man. This is definitely fun to get back. We love our special guests and we love everything that they have to offer. But every now and then, you guys get to listen to us just say whatever the fuck we feel like saying at that time. But we hope that it's helpful and we hope that it's educational because that's the biggest applause that I've gotten about this podcast was that we're educational. Like it's not just us ranting about bullshit and we do talk about bullshit, don't get me wrong, like jujitsu and stuff like that. But ultimately it's we always want this to be educational for you guys. And so again, I will tell you guys this two things before we sign off today. If you guys have any topics that you would like us to go over, again, if we don't think we can answer them or add value to you guys, we will wait for the right
Yeah, we will
special
find the
guest.
person.
Yeah, we will find
Right.
the person or wait for the right special guest to ask those things that we think they will add value to you guys. We had some of you guys ask us about social media, so we went out and reached out to Tom Davis and we went out to reach out to Canine Performance so that you guys could have information about social media. You wanted to know more about teaching, so we got Michael Ellis, we got Blake Rodriguez. So everything that you guys send us and give us feedback on, we want to provide for you. So this is a privilege for both me and Mariano. So we're super excited to do the research and ask the questions to the people. And so yeah, just keep it coming. Keep all the questions. DM us, email us, Kenneth, or no, that's my personal one, dog trainers podcast at gmail.com or DM us at dog trainers podcast. Other thing also, shout out to our boy, I forget, oh my gosh, from Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. What is his name? Got to give him a shout out real quick because he followed directions and he's the man. What is his name? Oh, I forget his name. Dang, dang, dang. Give me 2 seconds. 2 seconds.
Are we talking Instagram?
Yep. Yep.
Norca?
Nope. No, I love Norca. What's up, Norca? Shout out to Melissa Velez, Taylor Campbell, Matt Hubble, Norca. Ooh, we got to tell people who we're going to have on next week, but I'll tell you guys via Instagram. Where's he at, my bro? Where are you?
While you do that. By the way, guys, all of the growth from this podcast, because we've done no like paid ad or anything like that, has all been you guys being awesome enough to listen yourselves and then share. And we just ask that if you've gained value from this episode, do us a favor and just tell one other person about it. It really does help that much, not only in helping us grow the podcast, but also maybe they'll learn something that they didn't know. You never know, but sometimes the information you have may be the thing to save the other dog's life.
Yeah, yeah, or inspire that person
Right.
who wants to be a trainer.
Right.
Oh yeah, shout out. So in our Larry Crone episode, we asked you guys to please send us and DM us your Instagrams or just message us on Instagram so we know who you are and where you guys are located. Send us your website so we can go ahead and check you guys out and research. Guys, we have so many people, both personal clients for our own companies, but also just people that reach out to the podcast and they ask us, hey, do you guys recommend any clients or any trainers in
Right. In this area,
this state or that state or
Right.
this state? And sadly, we don't know necessarily all of you guys personally. So if you guys want to get to know us, we respond to our DMs, like all of you guys who listen to us. Great. So we want to give a shout out to Cochrane Canine. What's this gentleman's name? Let's see. Is Matt? Yep, his name's Matt. What's up, Matt? At Cochrane Canine Training out in Pittsburgh, PA. Thank you so much for sending us your information, man. We checked out all your stuff. We love it, and we want all of you guys to do the same. Let us know where you're located. We're going to create a little map where everyone who listens to this podcast is located, so that way we can get a better idea of who we can refer out to you guys. As Mariano said, please share this episode with at least one other person. And we want to thank you guys, and we look forward to seeing you guys on episode 48. We have a very special guest, but you guys have to wait until next week. So thank you guys. Also, don't forget to leave reviews on your podcast platforms. Did you say that already?
I did not.
No, everyone, leave a review on your podcast platform. It allows us to show up more naturally in searches. So please do us that favor. And we love you guys. And we will see you guys in episode 48. Peace.
Peace. Thank you for listening to the Dog Trainers Podcast, a podcast created by dog trainers, for dog trainers, or anyone who's ever fallen in love with man's best friend.
We really hope you guys enjoyed this episode, and we hope to see you back for the next one. But in the meantime, please follow us on Instagram and Facebook at Dog Trainers Podcast. Go ahead and leave a comment. Ask us any questions that you want. We would love to connect with our dog trainer communities all around the world. Take care, guys. We'll see you next time.